The night was quiet on New Earth Colony 9. A cold wind moved through the empty streets of Sector Delta, carrying dust from the red hills outside the human base. Officer Raylan Ward walked alone, his boots pressing against the metal floor panels, his helmet light cutting through the dark. He had done this patrol 100 times before. It was usually boring. Nothing ever happened here. But tonight felt different. Something in the air made him uneasy. The sensors on his wrist pad blinked, showing strange movement ahead. Slow, steady, not mechanical. Could be a stray colonist, he thought. Or worse, a wild Dravon. Dravons were the planet's native predators, fast, strong, and intelligent. Even one adult Dravon could destroy an entire patrol unit. The colony had lost many men to those creatures in the last year. Raylan tightened his grip on his rifle and spoke into his comms. "Control, this is Patrol Unit 3, detecting movement near Gate 47, investigating." No response. Static filled his headset. He sighed. "Great, comms are dead again." He moved forward carefully, keeping his weapon ready. The air was colder now, fog rising from the ground like smoke. Then through the mist he saw a shadow, a human shape walking slowly. "Hey," he shouted. "Stop right there!" The figure stopped. The sound of soft breathing echoed. Raylan's light beam fell on a woman. She looked weak, her clothes torn, her face pale. But what shocked him most were the two small creatures she carried in her arms. At first he thought they were pets. But then his wrist scanner beeped sharply. "Warning, Dravon DNA detected." His heart froze. Those were not pets. They were Draven cubs, predator babies, each one deadly even at this size. He raised his rifle instantly. "Ma'am, don't move. Put those things down now." The woman didn't panic. She just stood there, holding the sleeping cubs close to her chest like babies. Her voice was tired, soft, but calm. "Please, don't hurt them," Raylan frowned. "Don't hurt them? They're dangerous. Do you know what those things can do?" She shook her head slowly. "Not anymore," she said. Her words confused him. "What do you mean, not anymore? Who are you?" The woman took a step forward, her arms trembling under the cub's weight. "They're not dangerous now. They're just scared." Raylan noticed something strange. The cubs were calm, too calm. Normally, even baby Dravens hissed or growled near humans. But these two slept peacefully across her arms, their small claws lightly gripping her jacket. The wind blew harder, carrying the smell of burnt metal and smoke. Raylan realized her clothes were covered with dust and blood. "Where did you come from?" he asked. "From the outpost," she whispered. He looked shocked. "The Draven Research Outpost? That place was destroyed 3 months ago. No one survived." She looked at him with tired eyes. "I did." For a moment neither spoke. Only the sound of the wind and the soft breathing of the cubs filled the silence. Raylan lowered his weapon slightly, but didn't relax. "If you really came from that outpost, you should be dead. How did you survive?" She looked down at the cubs and said, "They saved me." He stared at her, not believing what he heard. "You're saying they saved you?" "The same species that wiped out the whole research team." She nodded. "They're not what you think." Raylan took a step closer. His scanner continued to flash red. The cubs' heat signatures were stable, not aggressive. He could see their tiny chests rise and fall as they slept. One of them made a soft, chirping sound, like a kitten dreaming. He was torn between duty and curiosity. He should arrest her, or maybe even shoot before the cubs grew dangerous. But something about the way she looked at them stopped him. Her eyes were full of pain, but also warmth. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "you can't keep them. You know the law. All Draven life forms must be terminated on sight." She whispered, "Then you'll have to kill me first." Raylan froze. Her voice wasn't defiant. It was sad. He saw tears in her eyes, catching the light from his helmet lamp. "Please," she said softly. "They're the last ones. If they die, everything dies." Her words made no sense, but they carried weight, like a secret too heavy to hold. Raylan lowered his weapon slowly. "Okay, let's just talk. What's your name?" She hesitated. "Lyra? All right, Lyra, you're coming with me. The base will need to hear your story." Lyra looked down at the cubs. "If I go, they come too," Raylan sighed. "Fine, but keep them quiet. If the scanners catch their signals, the base will send drones." She nodded. "They'll stay asleep. They trust me." As they walked back toward the colony lights, Raylan kept glancing at her. Her steps were weak, like she hadn't eaten in days. The cubs shifted slightly, curling closer to her chest. "Why are you doing this?" he asked finally. "Why risk your life for creatures that killed your people?" Lyra didn't answer at first. Then she said quietly, "Because they didn't kill us out of hate. They were trying to protect something." Raylan frowned. "Protect what?" She looked at him and whispered, "Their children." He stared at the cubs again, realizing what she meant. She had taken the babies of the creatures that destroyed her outpost, and instead of killing them, she was protecting them. They reached the base gate. Security drones scanned them instantly. The system's red lights flashed. Warning, Dravon presence detected. Raylan cursed under his breath. "We need to move fast." But before they entered the checkpoint, he turned to her once more. "You understand, right? Once we're inside, they'll take those cubs away." She looked at him with tired, haunted eyes. "Not if you believe me." He paused. "Believe you? About what?" She took a slow breath, her voice breaking slightly. "They're not dangerous anymore. Because they've already lost everything." Raylan stared at her, unsure what to say. He had seen soldiers lie, smugglers beg, and rebels manipulate. But there was something different about this woman. Her pain was real. As they stepped into the gate, the alarm went off louder this time. Guards shouted. Lights flashed. Raylan raised his hand to calm them, but everything happened fast. Drones aimed at her, scanning the cubs. "Drop the creatures." A voice ordered from above. Lyra looked at Raylan and whispered, "If you want to shoot, do it now." Raylan hesitated, his heart pounding. Then, without understanding why, he stepped in front of her. The other soldiers froze, confused. Lyra looked up at him, her lips trembling, eyes full of exhaustion. "You could die for carrying those things," Raylan said quietly. She smiled faintly and whispered, "I already did once." The room went silent. Even the drones stopped moving for a second, as if the whole world was waiting to understand what she meant. And that's how it began. A night patrol that turned into something far greater than any mission. Raylan didn't know it yet, but this woman, and the creatures she carried, were about to change everything the human colonies believed about life, trust, and survival. The alarms echoed through the control room as Officer Raylan escorted the woman, Lyra, into the base. Security drones hovered above them, their red lights blinking like angry eyes. The soldiers at the gate raised their rifles, unsure whether to shoot or stand down. "Stand down," Raylan ordered. "She's with me." The guards hesitated. One of them whispered, "Sir, the scanners picked up Dravon DNA. Are those things alive?" Raylan nodded slightly. "They're cubs. Stay calm." The cubs in Lyra's arms were still sleeping, their small chests moving up and down quietly. Their silver fur glowed faintly under the harsh light. Lyra held them tightly, her eyes scanning the soldiers, not in fear but in quiet sadness. "Take her to the medical bay," Raylan said firmly, "and get the commander on the line, now." Inside the medical bay, white lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled of antiseptic and old metal. Raylan stood near the door while two med drones scanned Lyra from head to toe. Blue light beams passed over her body, showing data on a floating screen. One drone beeped. "Severe radiation scars detected. Multiple fractures, malnutrition." Raylan frowned. "How long has she been out there?" "Estimated 91 days, the drone replied. 91 days. That was impossible. No human could survive that long in the outer wilds without food, water, or protection from the storms, and certainly not surrounded by Dravons." Raylan crossed his arms. "She said she came from the research outpost. Check if that's true." The drone connected to the colony database. After a moment, it spoke again. "Identity confirmed. Checked. Dr. Lyra Halen, former xenobiologist, Draven Research Outpost. Declared deceased 3 months ago." Raylan looked at her. "So you really are her. Everyone thought you were dead." Lyra gave a faint smile. "Maybe I am." He didn't know what to say. Her voice sounded empty, like someone who had seen too much to care anymore. The cubs were placed on a nearby table, still asleep. A scanner hovered above them, analyzing their DNA. The readings shocked even the medical drones. "Unusual result," one drone said. "Dravon DNA detected Y, but energy levels are stable. No aggression. No infection markers." Raylan raised an eyebrow. "No infection? That's not possible." Dravens always carry neural spores. They drive humans insane. Lyra looked up at him and said softly, "Not these ones." He turned to her. "Explain." She hesitated, glancing at the cubs. "At the outpost, we were studying Draven behavior. We believed they attacked without reason. But we were wrong. Wrong how?" Raylan asked. She looked him straight in the eyes. "They didn't attack to kill us. They attacked to protect their young." Raylan frowned. "That doesn't make sense. The outpost was wiped out. We saw the footage. It was chaos." Lyra nodded slowly. "Because we caused it." Her words hung in the air. Raylan's expression hardened. "You mean humans started it?" "Yes," she said quietly. "One of the officers ordered the capture of 2 Draven hatchlings for genetic testing. We thought it was harmless research." She looked down, her hands trembling slightly. "But the Dravens came for them. Not to destroy us, to save their children. They're not monsters, officer. They're parents." Raylan didn't know how to respond. The story sounded insane, but the sadness in her eyes made it feel real. "So, those cubs you're carrying," he said slowly. "They're the same ones," she finished. "The ones we took. Their parents died trying to reach them." He stared at the sleeping cubs again. Their faces looked peaceful, almost innocent. "Why didn't you report this sooner?" he asked. "I tried," she said. "But when the attack began, the communications tower went down. I hid underground for days. When I came out, everyone was gone, and only the cubs were still alive." She paused, her voice breaking. "I couldn't leave them. I thought if I saved them, maybe something good could still come out of all that death." The door opened, and Commander Voss walked in, a tall man with sharp eyes and a cold expression. "What is this nonsense, Officer Ward?" he demanded. "Why is a civilian in my base holding 2 alien predators?" Raylan stood straight. "Sir, she's Dr. Lyra Halen, survivor of the Draven outpost. She claims the cubs are harmless." "Harmless?" the commander snapped. "They're Dravens. Kill them now before they grow." Lyra stepped forward. "No, please. They're not like the others. They've changed." The commander looked at her like she was insane. "Changed? They're beasts. Do you know how many lives we've lost to those things?" Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "I know, I was there. I saw them die too. But these 2 are different. I've been with them for months. They sleep beside me, they trust me. They're not killers anymore." Voss turned to Raylan. "Lock her up. I'll have the cubs destroyed and the data analyzed." Raylan hesitated. "Sir, maybe we should test them first. The scanners show no aggression." Voss glared at him. "You're starting to sound like her, officer." He pointed at Lyra. "Take her to isolation, now." 2 guards moved forward. Lyra didn't fight back. She looked tired, like she expected this to happen. But as they took her away, she turned to Raylan and said quietly, "Don't let them kill them. Please, if they die, something worse will come." Raylan frowned. "What do you mean worse?" But the guards had already taken her down the hallway, and her voice faded away. That night, Raylan couldn't sleep. Her words kept echoing in his mind. "If they die, something worse will come." He opened the data file from her ID chip. It contained old research logs, videos, DNA scans, and personal notes. In one clip, Lyra was smiling, standing beside 2 small Draven cubs inside a glass room. She was saying, "They learn fast. They recognize patterns. They respond to emotion." In the background, the cubs reached out toward her, making soft sounds, almost like laughter. The clip ended with a loud explosion and static. Raylan leaned back, rubbing his eyes. The woman he met tonight wasn't a liar. She was broken, yes, but honest. And if what she said was true, humanity might have been the real monster in this story. He closed the file, his heart heavy. Outside, thunder rolled over the colony walls, shaking the lights. In the medical bay, behind locked glass, the cubs stirred. Their blue eyes opened for the first time since arrival, glowing faintly in the dark. They looked toward the door, as if sensing something, and miles away, deep in the fog-covered hills of Colony 9, a low roar answered them, long, deep, and full of pain. The Dravens were not finished yet. The next morning, the colony sky was gray. A cold wind blew dust across the metal streets. Inside the main base, Officer Raylan Ward stood outside the interrogation room, staring through the glass wall. Inside sat Dr. Lyra Halen, hands cuffed to the table, her face pale and tired. The two Draven cubs were in a separate room nearby, guarded by soldiers and scanning drones. Raylan hadn't slept at all. He couldn't stop thinking about her words. If they die, something worse will come. He didn't know what that meant. But deep down he could feel it. She wasn't lying. Commander Voss entered the hall, his boots hitting the floor hard. "Officer Ward," he said coldly. "You'll question her again. We need the truth. Who helped her? What's her real mission?" Raylan nodded, hiding his frustration. "Yes, sir." "Good," the commander said. "And remember, this is not about feelings. Those things she brought here are monsters, not pets." He left without another word. Raylan waited until the door closed, then stepped into the room. Lyra looked up when she heard the door. "Officer Ward," she said softly. "You came back." "I had to," he replied, sitting across from her. "You said some strange things last night." "I need answers." She gave a tired smile. "Strange things are all I have left." He leaned forward. "You said the Dravens attacked the research outpost because humans took their children. You said they were protecting them. Are you sure about that?" Lyra nodded slowly. "I was there when it started. I saw everything." Raylan crossed his arms. "Tell me what happened." From the beginning, Lyra took a deep breath. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were full of old pain. "The research outpost wasn't only studying Draven behavior," she began. "It was testing human DNA mixed with Draven genes. The goal was to make soldiers stronger, faster. We called it Project Echo." Raylan frowned. "Genetic experiments?" "That's illegal," she nodded. "It was secret, funded by the higher command. They wanted to make humans evolve faster, to survive this planet. But the tests failed. Every subject died, until the scientists decided to use real Draven tissue." She paused, remembering. "We captured 2 young Dravens for research. I protested, but no one listened. They said it was for humanity's future." Raylan stayed silent. He could imagine the scene. Cages, machines, frightened creatures crying in the dark. "Then," Lyra continued, "the adult Dravens came. At first we thought it was an attack. But when I looked closer through the cameras, I saw something different." Her voice trembled slightly. "They weren't killing everyone. They were trying to reach the lab room, the one with the cages. I watched one of them break its claws on the steel walls, trying to open the door. It didn't stop even when soldiers shot at it." She looked down, whispering, "They died protecting their young. The same young I helped capture." Raylan's chest felt heavy. "So you let them go?" She nodded. "Yes, when the base was falling apart, I opened the cages. I thought the parents would stop if they got their babies back." Her eyes filled with tears. "But the explosion came too soon. The parents died in the blast. The cubs were thrown clear, and I found them later, buried under the rubble." She looked up at him, her voice breaking. "They had no one left, officer, no family. So I became theirs." Raylan sat back, trying to process everything. Her story sounded impossible. "But it felt real. Why didn't you contact the colony?" he asked. "Why wander out there for months?" She looked away. "Because I knew what command would do. They'd kill the cubs, call them dangerous, and burn the site to hide the truth. I couldn't let that happen. I thought if I kept them alive, maybe there was a chance for peace." Raylan rubbed his forehead. "You know they'll never believe you, right? To them, Dravens are monsters. Always have been." Lyra smiled sadly. "Maybe that's why I needed you to see them sleep." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "When you saw them last night, quiet, gentle. That was the truth," she said. "Not the footage, not the reports. Just 2 children sleeping without fear." Her words hit him harder than he expected. For years, Raylan had seen Dravens as enemies, faceless beasts that killed his friends. But now he wasn't so sure anymore. The door suddenly opened. Commander Voss walked in with 2 officers and a data pad in his hand. "Enough of this," he snapped. "We analyzed the cub's blood. The results are strange." Raylan turned. "Strange how?" Voss looked at the report. "Their DNA has human patterns. Someone has tampered with them." Lyra's face went pale. No, that's not possible." "I never," Voss interrupted. "Save your story, Doctor. Either you experimented on them or someone did. Either way, they're dangerous." He turned to the guards. "Prepare the dissection lab. I want them studied before they grow any bigger." Lyra stood up suddenly, panic in her eyes. You can't do that. They'll die, Voss glared. Then they die. Better them than more of my men. She looked at Raylan desperately. You can't let them do this, please. They're not just animals. They're proof that peace is possible. Raylan hesitated. He wanted to believe her, but orders were orders. Still, something inside him refused to let her go like this. He looked at the commander. Sir, we could at least run a behavioral test. See if they really are a threat before killing them. Voss frowned. A test? Are you questioning my orders, officer? Raylan stood straight. No, sir. Just requesting protocol. The council won't like it if we destroy valuable biological data. The commander's eyes narrowed. He knew Raylan was buying time, but he didn't argue. Fine. One test. But if they show even one sign of aggression, they're dead. He turned to leave. And the woman stays locked up until this is over. When the door closed, Lyra exhaled shakily. Thank you, she whispered. Raylan didn't answer. He just stared at her, then at the window where the cubs slept. Don't thank me yet, he said quietly. If they fail that test, I won't be able to stop him. She looked at him, her eyes full of determination. They won't fail. You'll see who they really are. Raylan nodded slowly, though doubt filled his mind. As he left the room, he passed by the glass chamber where the cubs were kept. One of them opened its eyes, bright blue, glowing softly like a tiny star. For a moment, Raylan could have sworn it was watching him. Not like an animal, but like it understood. He stopped, frozen. Then the cub blinked and closed its eyes again. Raylan walked away with a heavy heart. He didn't know what was true anymore, who was right, who was wrong. But one thing was clear. This was no ordinary mission, and somewhere deep inside, he felt it. This was just the beginning. The next day, the base was silent. But it was not a peaceful silence. It was the kind that comes before a storm. Inside the laboratory, the air felt cold and heavy. Machines hummed softly, their lights blinking blue and red. Behind the glass, while two Draven cubs sat quietly, looking around with curious eyes, Officer Raylan Ward stood beside the control table, his arms crossed, his face tense. Beside him stood Commander Voss, calm and strict as always. Begin the test, the commander said. A group of scientists tapped on their screens. The glass wall brightened, filling the chamber with a soft light. A small metal drone entered the enclosure. It carried a food container and a scanning device. The cubs watched it, tilting their heads. Test 1, said one scientist. Food introduction, behavior under observation. The drone opened the container, showing a piece of protein meat. The cubs sniffed the air, then walked closer. They didn't attack. They didn't growl. One of them simply sat down, staring curiously at the floating drone. Raylan felt something stir in his chest. They're not afraid, he said softly. They're just watching. Voss didn't look impressed. Wait, the real test hasn't started yet, he nodded to the scientist. Activate threat simulation. The lights dimmed. A holographic figure appeared in the chamber, a soldier holding a rifle aiming at the cubs. Instantly, the cubs reacted. Their eyes glowed faintly blue, and they pressed themselves together, trembling. One of them made a soft sound, not a roar, but a cry. Lyra, watching from her holding cell through the security camera, slammed her hands against the glass. "Stop it, you're scaring them," she shouted. But no one listened. Inside the lab, Raylan's jaw tightened. "They're terrified," he said. "They think it's real." Voss folded his arms. "Good. Let's see what they do when they feel threatened." The holographic soldier took a step forward. The cubs shrank back, one covering the other with its body, like it was trying to protect its sibling. Then something strange happened. The scanner readings changed. The cubs' energy levels spiked, but not in aggression. Their heart rates synchronized. Their blue eyes shone brighter, like two tiny suns pulsing together. The drone's display flashed a warning. Unknown neural signal detected. "What is that?" Raylan asked. The scientist's hands shook. It's like an energy wave. It's not attack mode, it's communication." "Communication," Raylan repeated. "Yes, the scientist said. They're linking minds, protecting each other. Raylan's heart pounded. They're showing empathy. Voss looked irritated. Empathy? They're animals. Before anyone could speak, the lights flickered. The hologram glitched and disappeared. The cubs stopped shaking. One of them looked up directly at Raylan through the glass. For a long moment, their eyes met. And in that silence, Raylan felt something. Not in his head, but deep inside. A calm voice, soft and childlike, whispering in his mind. We don't want to fight. Raylan froze. He looked at the scientist. Did you hear that? The man shook his head. Hear what? Raylan stared at the cubs again. One blinked, the other tilted its head. The feeling faded. Voss noticed the change in his expression. What's wrong, officer? Nothing, Raylan said quickly. Just nothing. The commander turned back to the screen. All right, end the test. They passed your little peace game. Now we move to the next phase. Raylan frowned. What next phase? Voss smirked. Containment termination. The council wants proof these things can't harm us, even after death. Raylan's stomach dropped. You're going to kill them? Of course, Voss said coldly. That was always the plan. Down in her cell, Lyra's voice came through the speaker. No, please, don't hurt them. Voss ignored her completely. He gave a simple order. Prepare the toxin chamber. Raylan stepped forward. Sir, that's unnecessary. They've shown no aggression. They're harmless. Voss glared at him. Are you questioning me again, Officer Ward? Raylan met his eyes. With respect, sir, I think we should keep them alive, study them further. They could be valuable. The commander stepped closer. Valuable? You think 2 alien beasts are worth more than human safety? They're not beasts, Raylan snapped. They're children. Everyone in the room went silent. The commander's face turned red with anger. Careful, officer. You're starting to sound like the traitor we have locked in that cell. Raylan didn't reply. He just looked back at the glass room, where the cubs were still huddled together, unaware of what was coming. Voss gave the final command. Activate the toxin feed. The chamber lights turned red. A hiss filled the room as a faint gas started leaking inside. The cubs woke up, confused, coughing softly. They cried, high-pitched sounds that echoed through the speakers. Lyra screamed from her cell. Stop, please stop. Raylan couldn't take it anymore. He slammed his hand on the control panel and shut down the gas valve. The alarms blared instantly. Unauthorized access detected. Voss turned in fury. What the hell are you doing, Ward? Raylan pointed his rifle toward the control board. I won't let you kill them. Are you out of your mind? The commander shouted. That's treason. Then call it that, Raylan said, his voice cold. But you're not murdering them while I'm here. The other soldiers aimed their weapons at him, but no one fired. The commander took a step forward. Lower your weapon, officer. This is your last warning. Raylan stood firm. Open the door to Lyra's cell, he ordered one of the techs. Now. The man hesitated, shaking. Sir, Raylan aimed his rifle at the control board. Do it. With trembling hands, the tech obeyed. The door clicked open. Lyra ran out, her eyes wide with shock. Raylan, what are you? No time, he said. We're getting them out of here. She nodded instantly. Together they rushed to the containment room. Raylan entered the code, and the glass chamber door slid open. The cubs looked up and whimpered softly. Lyra picked them up quickly, holding them close. Alarms echoed through the entire base now. Soldiers shouted, boots hitting the floor. Go! Raylan shouted. Through the maintenance tunnel. Lyra ran, the cubs clutched tightly against her chest. Raylan followed, firing warning shots behind them. Commander Voss's voice thundered through the intercom. Stop them! They're traitors! Shoot on sight! The corridor lights flashed red. Drones flew overhead, scanning for movement. But Raylan and Lyra disappeared into the tunnel's darkness, into the unknown. Outside the colony walls, the storm was rising. Winds howled across the wasteland, lightning flashing in the red sky. Lyra fell to her knees, exhausted, clutching the cubs. Raylan helped her up. They won't stop chasing us, he said. She nodded weakly. Then we keep moving. There's a place. The neutral zone. The Draven elders will protect them there. Raylan looked at the horizon, endless, dark, and full of danger. But he didn't care anymore. For the first time in his life, he wasn't following orders. He was following his conscience, and deep inside, he knew. There was no going back now. The storm raged outside the colony walls. Red lightning split the dark sky, and the wind howled like a beast. Dust and sand swirled around, hiding everything beyond a few meters. Raylan and Lyra ran through the wasteland, their bodies cold, their faces covered with dirt and rain. Lyra held the 2 Draven cubs close to her chest. They were shivering but still alive. Behind them, alarms echoed faintly in the wind. The colony's lights flashed like angry eyes in the distance. "They'll come after us," Lyra said, breathing hard. "I know," Raylan replied. "We have to reach the ridge before sunrise. The signal towers will block their drones there." The ground was rough, full of broken rocks and old ruins. Every few minutes a search drone flew above, its blue light scanning the land. Raylan grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her behind a fallen wall. "Stay still," he whispered. They held their breath as the drone passed overhead. Its searchlight moved across the sand, then disappeared into the storm. Only then did they move again. After an hour of running, they found an old bunker half buried under the sand. The metal door was rusty but still strong. Raylan forced it open with his shoulder. Inside, the air smelled of dust and oil. Flickering lights from the storm outside shone through cracks in the roof. Lyra placed the cubs down gently. One of them whimpered softly, curling against her arm. "They're scared," she said softly. Raylan knelt beside them. "So am I." Lyra looked at him. His uniform was torn, his face bruised, but his eyes, they had changed. The cold soldier who once followed every order was gone. Now he looked human. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For saving them." Raylan looked at the cubs. "When I saw them in that chamber, I couldn't just stand there." There was silence for a moment, only the sound of the storm outside. Then one of the cubs moved closer to Raylan and touched his hand with its small paw. He froze. Its fur was warm, soft, and slightly glowing. Lyra smiled faintly. "They trust you now." He let out a small breath. "That's dangerous. Trust gets you killed out here." "Maybe," she said. "But without it, no one survives." Suddenly, a faint buzzing sound came from outside. Raylan's head snapped up. "Drones!" He rushed to the door and peeked through a crack. 3 dark shapes hovered in the distance, their lights blinking. "They've found us," he whispered. Lyra held the cubs close again. "We can't fight them. Not with the little ones." "I'm not planning to fight," Raylan said, checking his wrist device. "There's a maintenance tunnel under this bunker. It leads east toward the dry riverbed. We can use it." He lifted a metal hatch from the floor. The air below smelled of rust and moisture. "Go," he said. "I'll cover you." Lyra hesitated. "You'll get caught? I'll be right behind you." "Now move." She climbed down, carrying the cubs carefully. Raylan waited until they were safe below, then closed the hatch halfway. The drones came closer, their engines humming. Red scanning beams sliced through the dust. Raylan picked up a broken pipe and threw it across the room. The noise made the drones turn toward it, scanning the wrong direction. He slipped into the hatch quietly and shut it behind him. The tunnel was narrow and dark. Water dripped from the ceiling, and the walls were lined with old pipes. Lyra was a few steps ahead, her arm glowing faintly from the cub's blue fur. Raylan crawled behind her, his weapon ready. "How far does this go?" she asked. "About 3 kilometers, he said. "It should lead us to the canyon. From there we can cross into the neutral zone." The cubs whimpered again, tired and hungry. Lyra stopped and gave them water from her flask. "They're just babies," she whispered. "They've lost everything." Raylan nodded slowly. "So have we." After a long crawl, they reached a metal grate at the tunnel's end. Raylan pushed it open and climbed out first. Cold air hit his face. They were in a deep canyon, silent, hidden, safe for now. The storm had passed, leaving the sky full of dim red clouds. Lyra climbed out, holding the cubs. She sat on a rock, exhausted. Raylan scanned the horizon. "No drones?" "We're clear." He sat beside her, leaning against the rock. For a moment, there was peace. The cubs slept in Lyra's arms. Raylan looked at the horizon. So, what's next? Lyra gazed toward the east. There's a Draven outpost across the salt flats. It's far, but if we reach it, they'll protect the cubs. Raylan nodded. Then we head there. But you know, she said quietly, if the council catches us, they'll call us traitors. They'll execute you. He smiled bitterly. Maybe, but at least I'll die for something that matters. Lyra looked at him for a long time. Then she said softly, You're not like them, Raylan. Not anymore, he turned to her. Neither are you. Just then, a distant explosion echoed behind them. Raylan stood up instantly. Smoke rose from the direction of the colony. They're sending out hunter ships, he said grimly. They'll search every canyon, every ruin. Lyra held the cubs tighter. We have to move now. Raylan helped her up. Stay close. Don't make a sound. They started walking along the canyon path, stepping over stones and fallen metal. The cubs peeked out from Lyra's arms, watching everything with wide blue eyes. One of them made a soft chirping sound, almost like a laugh. Raylan smiled despite the danger. They're tougher than they look. Lyra nodded. Yes, they remind me of their mother. He looked at her, curious. You knew her? Lyra's eyes turned sad. She saved me once. During the First War, when everyone thought the Draven were monsters, she chose to protect a human child. Raylan stared at her. You? She nodded. Yes, that's why I had to save her cubs. I owed her that much. Raylan was silent for a moment. Then he said, then maybe saving them is saving both our worlds. Hours later, they reached the edge of the canyon. The land beyond was flat and endless, shining under the pale red sky. Lyra looked at the cubs sleeping in her arms. We made it this far. Raylan tightened his grip on his rifle. And we'll make it farther. He took one last look back at the direction of the colony, the home he'd left behind forever. Somewhere out there, Commander Voss was hunting them, but Raylan didn't feel fear anymore. Only purpose. He turned toward the horizon and said quietly, Let's finish what we started. The morning sky burned red like fire. Dust storms drifted slowly over the salt plains. The air was heavy and dry, filled with the faint hum of engines in the distance. Raylan and Lyra moved carefully across the open land, keeping close to the rocks for cover. Lyra held the two Draven cubs wrapped in a gray cloth. Their glowing blue eyes peeked out, curious but silent. They're getting heavier, Lyra said softly. Raylan smiled faintly. That's a good sign. It means they're getting stronger, she nodded. But the stronger they get, the more danger they're in. He looked back over his shoulder. The horizon was empty, but both of them knew the silence wouldn't last. Hours later, the wind picked up again. Sand whipped across their faces as they climbed a steep ridge. When they reached the top, Raylan pulled out his binoculars. Far behind them, 3 dark shapes moved across the desert, hovering fast. Drones, he said quietly. They've found our trail. Lyra's heart sank. We can't outrun them. We won't, Raylan replied. We'll outsmart them. He pointed toward the east. A long canyon stretched into the distance, narrow, deep, full of shadows. If we head there, their scanners won't pick us up, he said. Lyra hesitated. And if they do? Raylan looked at her calmly. Then we make our stand. They moved quickly toward the canyon, fighting against the wind. The cubs clung tightly to Lyra, their soft fur glowing faintly in the red sunlight. One of them looked up at Raylan and made a small sound, a mixture of curiosity and fear. Raylan glanced back and whispered, Don't worry, little one. We're not giving up. As they neared the canyon, the sound of engines grew louder. The drones were closing in. Lyra turned to him. They're almost here. Raylan dropped to one knee, pressing a button on his wrist device. A small holographic map appeared showing the canyon walls. There, he said, pointing to a narrow section. We can hide there. I'll set a decoy signal on the ridge. He handed his rifle to Lyra. If anything happens, you run. Don't look back. Raylan, no, she said, shaking her head. I'm not leaving you. He gave her a small smile. I know, but if it comes to that. Take them and go. She hesitated, tears forming in her eyes. But she nodded. Raylan climbed up the rocky slope, sand crunching under his boots. He placed a signal emitter near a pile of stones, a small blinking device that would broadcast their location in a different direction. As he turned to climb down, a shadow passed over him. He looked up, and his heart froze. A massive hunter drone hovered above. Black and sleek, its red sensor scanning the area. It had found him. Raylan ran. The drone's engine roared, and plasma shots exploded in the sand around him. He slid down the slope, dirt flying in every direction. "Lyra, go!" he shouted. She clutched the cubs and sprinted into the canyon. Raylan ducked behind a rock, firing a few rounds at the drone. Sparks flew, but it didn't fall. It turned toward him again, charging another blast. Then suddenly a flash of blue light filled the air. The blast never came. The drone froze mid-air, its red lights flickering. Raylan looked up in shock and saw one of the cubs standing on a rock near the canyon's edge, its eyes glowing bright blue. "Lyra." "Get back!" Raylan shouted, but the cub didn't move. It raised its tiny paw, and the air around it shimmered, like invisible waves pulsing outward. The drone began to shake violently. Its systems glitched, alarms blaring. Then it crashed into the sand with a loud explosion. The cub fell to its knees, weak. Lyra ran forward and grabbed it. No, stay with me," she whispered. Raylan rushed over. "Is it hurt?" She shook her head. "Just tired." Whatever it did, it took everything it had. Raylan looked at the smoking wreckage of the drone. That was no ordinary reaction. That was power. Lyra looked up at him. "It's what the Council feared, that the Draven cubs could develop telepathic or energy abilities." "But that's not a weapon," Raylan said. "It's a defense mechanism." She nodded slowly. "They only use it to protect. They didn't have time to rest." The other drones were getting closer, drawn by the explosion. Raylan picked up the injured cub and handed it to Lyra. "We have to move now." They ran deeper into the canyon, the narrow walls echoing with the hum of engines behind them. Rocks fell from above as the drones fired blindly into the canyon's mouth. Raylan guided Lyra toward a small cave hidden behind a boulder. They slipped inside just as the drones passed overhead. Inside the cave, the air was cool and damp. They collapsed on the floor, exhausted. Lyra checked the cubs. The injured one was still breathing, its blue glow fading slightly. "They're pushing themselves too much," she said softly. Raylan looked out toward the canyon. "We'll rest here until night. Then we move again." Lyra nodded, but her eyes were full of worry. "They won't stop, Raylan. Commander Voss will come himself next time." Raylan clenched his jaw. "Then we'll be ready for him." Hours passed. The sky outside turned dark purple. Raylan sat near the cave's entrance, watching the stars slowly appear through the clouds. Lyra was resting with the cubs, whispering softly to them. Raylan could hear faint sounds, almost like the cubs were answering her. He smiled a little. "You can understand them, can't you?" She looked up. "Not with words, with feelings. They share emotions, memories, like pictures in my mind." Raylan frowned. "And what are they saying now?" Lyra paused, then said softly, "They're afraid, but they trust us. They believe we'll protect them." Raylan looked down at his hands, hands that once obeyed orders without question, hands that had taken lives. Now those same hands were holding hope for something different. He whispered, "Maybe this is what I was meant to do." Suddenly the cubs lifted their heads and looked toward the canyon entrance. Their blue eyes glowed faintly. Raylan tensed. "What is it?" Before Lyra could answer, a faint metallic sound echoed. Footsteps. Then a voice, deep and cold, filled the cave entrance. "I knew you'd come this way." Raylan's heart stopped. Commander Voss stepped out of the shadows, his armor gleaming under the moonlight. Behind him, soldiers surrounded the cave. Raylan raised his weapon, but Voss only smiled. "Put it down." "Ward, it's over." Lyra held the cubs tighter, whispering, "Don't hurt them." Voss's eyes narrowed. "I don't want to hurt anyone. Just hand over the creatures. The Council will handle the rest." Raylan shook his head. "No, they're innocent." Voss stepped closer. "You're betraying your own species for monsters." "They're not monsters," Raylan said firmly. "You are." Voss's smile faded. "So be it." He raised his blaster. The cubs began to glow again, brighter than before. And in that blinding light, the cave walls began to tremble. The cave shook as the light grew brighter. Rocks cracked. Dust filled the air. Commander Voss stumbled backward, covering his eyes. The soldiers aimed their rifles, shouting in panic, "What's happening?" One of them yelled. Raylan stood in front of Lyra and the cubs, shielding them with his body. The blue light from the cubs spread across the walls like waves of energy, humming softly. Not violent, but powerful. Then just as suddenly as it began, the light faded. The cave fell silent. Voss lowered his weapon slowly, his face pale. What did they just do? Lyra held the cubs close. They reacted to your anger. They don't fight, they defend. Raylan looked at Voss. They're trying to protect us all. Even you, Voss laughed harshly. Protect us? They're dangerous. You saw that power. If they grow up, they could destroy everything. Lyra shook her head. Or save everything, and if we let them. The commander raised his blaster again. I'm ending this before they become a threat. Raylan stepped in front of him. You'll have to go through me. Voss's eyes narrowed. Then you're a traitor. Maybe, Raylan said quietly. But I finally know who the real enemy is. Voss fired. The blast hit Raylan's shoulder, knocking him to the ground. Lyra screamed. The cubs cried out, their blue glow bursting again, brighter this time, filling the cave with energy. The soldiers dropped their weapons, clutching their heads. Images flashed in their minds. Memories, emotions, voices. They saw Draven families hiding during the war. They saw humans burning their villages out of fear. They saw Lyra as a child saved by a Draven mother, the same one who gave birth to these cubs. The truth hit everyone like a wave. The Dravens hadn't started the war. They had only fought to survive. Voss fell to his knees, gasping. No, that's not possible. Lyra stepped forward, tears in her eyes. You were taught to fear them. We all were. But look, they only wanted peace. The cubs moved closer to Raylan, placing their small paws on his wound. A soft blue light spread over his shoulder, healing the burn, closing the skin. Raylan's eyes widened. They can heal. Lyra nodded. They don't just protect life. They restore it. Voss looked up at them, trembling. Do you think the council will believe any of this? Raylan stood up slowly, pain fading from his voice. I don't care what the council believes. The truth is alive, and it's standing right here. Outside, thunder rumbled again. The storm was returning. Voss took a deep breath and stood. You can't run forever. Even if I let you go, others will come. Raylan looked him in the eyes. Then tell them what you saw. Tell them the Dravens aren't the monsters we thought. Voss hesitated. He looked at the cubs, small, fragile, glowing softly. For a moment, something human flickered in his expression. Then he turned away. I can't. The council will never listen. They'll destroy me too. Raylan stepped forward. Then maybe it's time someone stood up to them. Voss didn't answer. He looked at his soldiers, still shaking from what they saw. Finally, he lowered his weapon. You have 10 minutes, he said quietly. After that, I'll report this cave empty. Lyra's eyes widened. You're letting us go. Voss looked away. I didn't see anything. He walked out of the cave, his boots echoing in the silence. The soldiers followed slowly, their faces pale and uncertain. Raylan exhaled deeply. We're not safe yet. But it's a start, Lyra smiled faintly, holding the cubs close. He saw the truth. That's enough for now. They stepped out into the open desert. The wind had calmed. The red sky was slowly turning gold. Sunrise breaking through the clouds. Raylan looked toward the horizon. The neutral zone isn't far. If we reach the old Draven ruins, we can disappear, Lyra nodded. And maybe rebuild what was lost. They began walking again, step by step. The cubs nestled between them. For the first time, Raylan didn't feel like a soldier or a fugitive. He felt like a protector. Hours later, they reached a cliff overlooking the valley. Below them stretched ancient ruins, tall stone towers glowing faintly with the same blue light as the cubs. Lyra gasped. We found it. The Draven Sanctuary. The cubs chirped softly, their eyes lighting up. The ruins responded. Blue energy rising from the ground like mist. A faint voice echoed through the valley, calm, deep, ancient. It wasn't human. You have returned. And you are not alone. Lyra looked around, eyes wide. They're speaking to us. Raylan stepped forward. Who are you? The memory of those who came before. The last guardians of balance, the air shimmered. A glowing figure appeared. The spirit of a Draven elder, tall and graceful. You carried our children through death and war, the voice said. For that your hearts are bound to ours. Raylan bowed his head. We only did what was right. "That," said the spirit, "is why you were chosen." A bright light surrounded them all. The cubs floated gently into the air, their eyes shining like stars. Then the light faded, and the cubs landed softly on the ground, healthy and strong again. Lyra looked around, tears streaming down her face. "They're home," Raylan smiled, his voice soft. "Maybe. So are we." The spirit spoke one last time. "The war between your kinds began with fear, but one day it will end with courage, and with stories like yours." The light faded completely, leaving only silence and the sound of the wind. Raylan and Lyra stood side by side, watching the sun rise over the ruins. The cubs played in the sand, their laughter echoing like music. For the first time, there was peace. Raylan looked at Lyra and said quietly, "They asked me once if the cubs were heavy, but now I know." "They never were," Lyra smiled, understanding. "Because they weren't a burden." Raylan nodded slowly. "They were a promise." And with that, the two walked into the light, toward a new beginning.